little device, and you can see the image on the screen. It's you can see census records and marriage records and newspaper articles, and that was really interesting because in a short amount of time, she knew, I guess, just where to look, just based on the information I gave her, because all I had was the place of birth and approximate age, and she was actually able to find my paternal grandparents out of South Carolina. So that was my first resource. So today, again, your local library, they may have librarians who have some access or experience in genealogy, or perhaps they can direct you to someone that does. But as a first source, I would say try your local library. Then, of course, interview your family and get your oral histories. Of course, you have to verify those, but do what you can to record the stories of your elders, your parents, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles. And ask about family Bibles, because a lot of times the family Bibles have a lot of information that someone has archived in their birth dates, special events, etc. Digital archives, and we'll dive into that a little bit later, but there's a lot of digital archives online where a lot of prior research has already been done. Obituaries and probate records. And if you're searching in African American ancestry, you'll hit what we call the 1870 brick wall, because prior to that, there really weren't any census records of the enslaved. You might have a first name, but you wouldn't have the family structure, husband and wife, son and daughter, and their first and last names, etc. Free persons of color, you would find some of those prior to 1870, but after 1870, that was actually the first year that those who were emancipated appeared on the federal U.S. Census. So census records, marriage records, and GEDCOMS. GEDCOMS stands for Genealogical Data Communications, which is just like a text format. It's like a PDF file. An image file has JPG, a PDF file, it's a PDF. It's just another name for a type of file that is a text file that incorporates your genealogy. So when you're building your trees online, you're actually building what's called a GEDCOM. So others might have the GEDCOM on different websites, and you might be able to find a family tree that might be close to yours, or perhaps have your ancestors in their trees. And so you can refer to those GEDCOMs, but you would still want to verify the information. Historical societies are a very good source. And they're focused on preserving history and heritage. It could be a person, a place, or an event. And some of those are, of course, private. So they have subscriptions or membership fees. But then you have online genealogy groups, which are a lot of times just, they may be private or public, but they're just open groups, or folks who are maybe just getting started, or, others who are maybe really advanced in the process. But they help one another. And through collaboration, you can make some excellent process. So let's say you get started. So now,
Donnie, I want to just tell you, I appreciate this list, because I know when I've had to look for stuff, I'm like, well, all I know is what's 23andMe is saying. And then when I'm asking my aunt or uncle or my mom, and they're kind of remembering, and I'm like, well, where else can I look? And this is the list you kind of want to know that you can go and use for digging of things.
Yes.
And because I'm only people that like really have dug know this is all of the data you can go dig with.
Yeah.
So this is a great list to have.
Yeah, I really recommend, again, start with your list and your focus. And if you go step by step, and again, that's why I have the asterisk by the library, because really, everyone has a public library. It's not going to cost you anything. And it's a good place to get started. So thanks, Christine. I appreciate that. So now that you've defined your focus, ahead of time, I already gave you the precautions. Basically, I said, buckle your seatbelts, get ready, because you may not be prepared for what you find, but you should be prepared, because you may find some things that you're not prepared for. So just remember that Donnie said, be prepared. So you can't say if you find something you weren't prepared. So one of the first things that you do, and I recommend, this is my recommendation, again, start building your tree. So you already going through your checklist. So you got to start building your tree. But as you build your tree, remember to have the journal, because as you're building your tree, you may come across things that maybe you don't have the time to finish putting it in your ancestry tree, but you can just write it in your journal. Then that journal can be something you can pass on to someone else in your family who can continue their research. But I say log into Ancestry, open a free account, and you can use your email to do so. Once you open up a free Ancestry account, you do not have to hit the subscribe button. I know that that's something they're trying to encourage you to do because they're trying to make money, obviously, but I'm just letting you know that you do not have to have a subscription to build your tree or to access a lot of the records. Sure, some of the records you have to, pay the piper. You'll have to get a subscription, but I have another backdoor solution for you around that. So just remember, you do not have to get a subscription to build your tree and access some of the collections that they have on Ancestry. So this is the step. You log in with your email, whatever you choose, set up your password, so you'll get a confirmation. So now you've got your Ancestry account, and you're going to give yourself a profile name. So you can make an alias or use your real name, whatever you choose to do. First step, you'll see on the upper menu, pretty easy. It says free. So you click on tree, it allows you to start a new tree. And this is what you're going to see. You're going to see an empty screen. It's the first thing you're going to be paused to do is to create your first person, which should be you. Start with yourself. And that's what I did. So you go on the next slide, you'll see. So I entered a fictitious person. And this is what you do. You start with this screen. This is the first screen you're going to see. It's add yourself. So you're adding yourself, and you see the little blue box there. It says, I'm starting with myself. So why do we do this? The reason you start with yourself, not with your mom, dad, or your kids, it's going to show your position in your tree and name those positions as you enter each profile. Because I don't know how many of you can remember your second, third cousin 3 times removed related to your third uncle of the third grand. Like, come on, nobody's going to go through that. So use the resources that are there. So by using yourself as the home person, you're going to be able to enter yourself as the home person. So you'll enter your name, your gender, obviously your status. You don't have to put your birth date or your place of birth. You can just leave that out. You don't have to. If you do, it'll stay private because no one's going to be able to see any information on living persons until you give them access. So anyone you put in your tree that is living, they automatically show up as private. So unless you share it with someone and specifically give them access to see living persons, all they'll see is a little box that says private. So on the next step, after you've created yourself, you hit continue, and now, okay, I'm building my tree, so I have to name my tree. So when you name your tree, name it something that is relevant. And so what I did with this tree is about this sample person. That's actually their name. So their tree is called sample person. Well, let's just say I have a surname I'm following, and the surname is Johnson. So I will actually name the tree Johnson Research Tree. And let's say, oh, wow, I'm finding that I'm related to Johnsons and Jones. So maybe I'll create a Jones tree. And so I may have different trees based on surnames. And then it's good to have one all-encompassing tree. And that would be like your kitchen sink tree, where you'll put all your matches and all the information of everyone, because you may find different connections in the different independent trees that you built based on surnames. So my routine is to build trees based on surnames and known associations or regions. So I build trees on regions and surnames. So once you name your tree, then it's important to remember, what am I going to do with the privacy? Am I going to make this a public tree, or is this going to be a private tree? So you have an option to select public or private, and then that's a personal decision. And you'll see on this screen here that gives you the option to select public or private. Even though you select private, you also have to select the option at the bottom, which is also prevent others from finding your tree in searches, because if you just select private tree, they can also see your tree. And by virtue of seeing your tree, they may not be able to see all the information, but they'll see some information. So if you want to totally hide your tree in your research, let's say it's something that's confidential, or there's information in your tree you don't really want to share with the public at all, only with close family members in confidence, make sure you check private tree and prevent viewing in the public search. So once you've done that, you can go to the next step. So you've entered your tree, you put yourself in, and so here you are, sample person. And so this is what the first step looks like. And you notice that there's already two boxes above that, and it says add father, add mother. And so you go to the next step. You simply click on the box and you're at the next screen. So now you can add your mother or your father. And this is what it looks like. You'll add your parent. And in this case, I'm adding a father on the paternal line. So you check information that's relevant to them as much as you do know. And you'll notice that as you're putting in their birthplaces, Ancestry actually has a database built into the website. So as you're typing, it's going to give you suggestions on where. And here we are in New York City, like Christine, you were talking about New York City. Okay, well, there's New York, there's New York County, there's so many different options. So it's trying to help you be accurate, because the more accurate your information, again, going back to facts, it's going to help. Because if you put in just New York, and let's say there's someone else with the same name, but it's actually New York County, you're already playing this gray area where the who's who. So we put the father in. So now this is what happened to you.
This is
We got
great to know,
mom.
I will say. I will just say, stop you for a second to say this is great to know, because I found the family when I was 16. I went to Germany and met family that lives in the US, but I never had contact with them after that. And so I found them through doing a 23andMe. I found a cousin that's the same genealogical depth as I am. And she has
Yes.
all her family and relatives, and I have all my family and we have a common, I have my grandmother and then her grandmother were sisters. And so it just kind of went out from there. And I said, I'm going to put together a family tree. Well, I tried that. Let me tell you, I couldn't find anything big enough to do it on. I had like Canva pulled out and I was making bubbles and I was inserting
Yeah.
Word text boxes. And I was like, this is going to take me forever. And then the minute you start doing it all and putting it in there, I've run out of space, and it was
Yeah.
like, so I
Yeah.
should try to do this ancestry. I didn't know that this was completely free, that I could sit and do this.
Yeah. It's
Um,
it's
because this would house it all. This would keep
yes.
it all, because once I sat with her family and then my family, and then I was like, oh my God, I only did my grandmother's side. I didn't even get my grandfather's side done yet. And I was like, I've got
That's
no
so
space
funny.
left.
That's so funny. See, that's going back to what we were saying the first slide about, it's not a family tree, it's a family forest. So you got to be prepared. So
Yes, and it really is, because that was like, and then, like 23andMe will tell me I have 100 on my mother's German side. Well, on my father's Cuban side, how many relatives am I connected to? It's like 550. There's like a
yes.
lot more on that side of the family. I was like, oh, well, I'm not making all those people fit. I doubt I'm very minutely connected to people in those areas, but
Yes. That is so true.
yeah.
And it's fun. I'm glad you mentioned that too, Christine, because when you're talking about building these trees, as you said, you don't know how, where you're going to stop again. It's like, where do you stop? Because it's not going to stop. So you might as well set up a platform like this in Ancestry
I,
and say, okay,
and
this is
and I
my
need to do
kitchen sink
this
tree.
because that was taking me like all day, and I was like, I need to work, I need to like feed people here and here, I need to get laundry done, I was like, I can't sit here and have this be all consuming, because because like you said, once you start going down that rabbit hole, it does start getting, and I send screenshots to my mom. Hey mom, do you know who that is? And to my aunt, hey, mom doesn't know who that is, do you know who that is? And I'm starting to bug them all, and they're like, oh, there goes Christina, she's on something else new, you know and
Um,
so I just know that this becomes all consuming. So if there is this free simple format, I really should try to do that because that would make this go so much faster and easier.
Yes.
Because you
Yeah.
get so overwhelmed that like it's somewhere up here in a file and I don't know when I gave up because it was too
Yeah.
much. And I don't
This
want to do that,
this
you
is
know.
true.
All
Oh, I
right,
just see
Johnny,
that. Is that
just
is
so you
that the
know,
time we have left?
we have about 15 minutes left. So
Oh,
I'm gonna let
okay.
you
Well,
keep
I'm
going.
gonna have I'm gonna have to go really quick then. Okay.
You got
All
it.
right.
If we go over 5, 10 minutes, we're okay. We'll be fine. As long
Okay.
as LaRon is okay. So, all
Okay.
right.
All right. So once you're building a tree, as we were saying, Christine, be prepared because it may be humongous. So, and this is just one way to view your tree. In the menu on the left-hand side, we're not going to do it now, but you can actually see that you can turn your tree horizontally. So now you can do a horizontal tree. So again, we've already put our father in there, but we notice that when we put our father in there, we don't know who his uh, wife is. This is our grandfather. So we don't know who his wife is. So we're going to do a search. So that was the next screen that Lorana was on. And so now we're doing a search. So you'll see on his profile, there's a search button. So if you reach a point where you're looking for someone or more information, you just simply hit the search button. So the next screen shows, all right, we're looking for grandpa's wife. And so when you do that, this is what you'll see. And so you have an option on the left. You can actually sort of filter what you're looking for. You can find your search to an exact match with his first name, his last name, date of birth, location. And then you'll see these suggestions that will appear. And you notice that they're highlighted and sort of blocked out. So some information is highlighted and some is blocked out. Well, the one that's blocked out, that requires a subscription. But as you notice, there's still information that if this was your relative, you can still gather information even from the information that's being shown. So just keep that in mind as a precaution. You might be tempted, wow, I can't see it. Okay, I'll pay for a subscription. No, just gather and glean what you can from the screens and then use the free resources that I'll refer you to later. But also on the left-hand side, you'll see all the different filters by region. You can search by military records, immigration records, even photos. You can look for photos. Hey, maybe there's a photo of grandpa. And so you can just click on photos and there's an option. So we've done that. We're on to the next step. And okay, we've been looking for grandma. And fortunately, in Ancestry, they'll actually show you hints automatically. So if there are any hints for the person you're looking for, it's going to show up under your tree hints. So in your tree view, you just hit hints. That's going to show you all the hints that are available for this particular person, records, photos, stories, etc., even other members' trees. And if there's a hint in a specific census record. And also notice I have circled DNA. Now, maybe you haven't done DNA, but I would suggest consider DNA testing. You can do all of your search without DNA testing, but if you do consider a deep dive into your ancestry, I'll just give you forewarning that with your DNA results, you'll have so much more progress at a faster rate. Do you need me to share my screen or?
I don't know, Lorana, if you know. I was
Nope, it's
telling
me coming back in.
Oh, okay.
I was telling Lorana that one of my my boyfriend's cousins here did a 20, her and her dad decided to do a 23andMe, you know, and you know, they said, "Oh, it's for fun, let's do this." And she's his caregiver. And they got it back and their results were very different. And none of her cousins were on her 23andMe. And they were like, "This is kind of odd." And her dad's result hadn't come back yet. It was taking longer. And so she just said, well, said to all her cousins, well, what one have you all done? And they said they did an ancestry. So then they decided to go ahead and do ancestry. She was impatient. She wanted to find out.
Uh,
So they did ancestry. And then those results came back and there was no match between her and her dad. And they were both floored that there was no match. And on her results were other people in town she knew, but she didn't think she'd never thought she was related to any of them. And so, and his wife died a couple of years ago. And so, and they were like, oh, that explains a bunch of stuff. And she was like, so they found out that they really aren't father-daughter. And they weren't even searching for that. They were just thinking it'd be fun to do this.
and see,
And they,
those are the things I was thinking about, telling you about in the beginning. At the very beginning, I was saying that the precaution is, and it's not a big enough sign to flash in front of everybody. Be prepared. So
Right, because
uh,
you might find some stuff in there. You might find you have a
oh,
sibling somewhere, or
more than likely you will. And as you're going into the next slide, Laurent, this is sort of segues back into that, because when you're taking a DNA test, you're going to be prepared, because you may not know um, anything about what you're going to see in your results, because it's going to compare. It's basically an analysis of your DNA to determine levels of relationship, and it's a consumer level testing. So they'll test you by your saliva, you'll spit in a tube, or a swab, and you'll swab for the cells in your cheek, because we all have what, like 38 or 28 or 18 trillion cells in our body, and the whole concept is that we all have cells in our body that carries like a genetic code of our ancestry. So these testing companies, they all have their own algorithm, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that's how you're able to sort of compare yourself to your other relatives, because they're going to compare your DNA to other relatives from a control group outside of the US and all the different regions where they show your ethnicity. That's how that's done. And they compare you to others who have taken the test recently on whatever platform. And these are the platforms that test for DNA: Ancestry, MyHeritage, Family Tree, DNA, 23andMe. And if you're looking for a deep dive on African ancestry, they have a website and a service called African Ancestry. And then to go back to the concept of, okay, well, what happens if my second cousin tests on Ancestry and someone else tests on 23andMe? Do we all have to keep taking the same test? No, you do not. That's why you use GEDmatch. This is a website which is like a database, collaborative effort. In one location, you can upload the results from Ancestry or MyHeritage, or Family Tree DNA, or 23andMe, and compare your results in one location for free. So here again, without taking a second test, just because an ancestor tests on one and another on another, it doesn't mean you have to take the same test from the same platform. You would log in and you open up an account on GEDmatch, create an account there, free account. And again, you don't need the subscription. Upload your DNA, and then now you're able to compare. And in this screen, the importance is you have traditional genetic genealogy where you're using your DNA. Then you have traditional, which is just driven by facts. You don't have any DNA data to fall back on. You're just doing it by researching facts, census records, all those sources that we talked about before. And when you're doing DNA testing, you have three options. You have what's called a Y-DNA, so you can test your paternal ancestry. You have mitochondrial DNA to test your maternal. And then you have autosomal. And that's the standard consumer level DNA testing you have on these sites. And so now we go to the next screen, and you'll see that the most important thing that I want to say in regards to DNA testing, and when you research, if you're going to be using DNA, is the presence of DNA means everything, but the absence of DNA doesn't mean anything at all. It doesn't mean anything. You may say, how does that make sense? Well, you'll see. In the next slide, you'll see we're just looking at the sex chromosome, because in our cells, we have 23 pairs of chromosome, and that's where we have our DNA and genetic information. Well, this is what's normally called the sex chromosome, the 23rd, sort of a special pair. And we have the mom with her two X chromosomes and dad with his X and Y. Well, mom can only pass what she has. So she only passes an X. That's all she can pass to son or daughter. But when she passes her X with her genes and genetic data, it's recombined. It's sort of like jumbled up, and there you go. There's my contribution. So each child gets half of their DNA from their dad, half from their mom. The moms can only pass her X. So let's stay on the mom's side. She's passing her X, and it's being recombined. And by the time you get to her granddaughter, you can see like, wow, it's nothing like the grandson. It's different. And then on the dad's side, all he can do is pass an X and a Y, but he only passes a Y to a son. He cannot pass a Y to his daughter. But you can see that's a way you can trace your paternal line, because all he can pass is his X, just a plain simple, plain vanilla X, no recombination, and his plain yellow or whatever color it is. In this case, it's blue, just as an example. It's the same Y DNA all the way down to the generations. And that's how you can trace your paternal line. So when you get down to the grandsons and granddaughters, you can see, wow, like Christine was saying, well, one person doesn't show they're related to another person. Well, that's true. But when you get further down into grandsons, great grandsons, you may have people who are related, but their DNA is so different, it may show like they're not related, but when they really are, because everything is random. But when you go to your closer relationships, you'll definitely see a relationship of your DNA in a high level. And the quantity or the unit of measurement is called centimorgans. So the higher the level of centimorgans you have, the closer you are. And typically sons and daughters, fathers and sons, you'll see about 3,500 centimorgans as being what's passed to them. And so here we are. You've chosen to do DNA testing. And for example, I have over 18,000 DNA matches and 2,000 fourth cousins. So that's data overload. So you got to focus. So the next step for me was, wow, that's way too many. So what I did was on the very next step, I looked at, okay, well, I've got 2 parents, 4 grandparents. How far can I realistically go on my research? And so this is just a list. So we can all sort of be realistic when you start your search. No, you're not going to find all your 6 great grandparents. I doubt you're going to find 256 people that were in the 1600s, because as you can see in my example, by the time I just get to my second grandparent, I'm already at 1810. My third great grandparent, I'm in the 1700s. So they're not even in the census records, because remember, African Americans who were emancipated, they're not even going to show up in census records until 1870. So in my case, I'm just being realistic. I may get to possibly some of my third or fourth, but I'll never get to the level of 5th or 6th. And for you as well, it's just something to sort of bring you down to the ground and say, just have a realistic expectations of what you're going to find, because you're going to find a lot of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th cousins in your searches if you do take the DNA test. And maybe you'll find 1 or 2 if they have really good trees because they built out their tree. But you've got to have realistic expectations, because just look, by the time you get to your 6th great grandparent, by the time you get to your 7th, you got 512 great grandparents, and a total of more than 510 just at the 6th great grandparent level. So this is a useful chart. It's just sort of help you identify how you're related to people, because it can be a daunting task. So if you find people show up as your 5th cousin on your DNA test, okay, they're related to me. We have a common 4th great grandparent. That sort of helps you refine your search. So you're just not just wailing around, going down rabbit holes. So, 2nd cousin, 3rd cousin, 4th, all the way through, you'll see who you're possibly related to, and it gives you more realistic numbers. So I can probably find my 3rd cousins and 4th cousins. That's not too bad. That's 32. There may be some I can find. So that takes me to the next slide and how we sort of culminated in Ecuador. This is a slide of my 4th, well, not my 4th cousin, but a distant cousin in Ecuador, Carmen, and her match to a cousin in the U.S. They show up as 5th and 8th cousins. So it's highly unlikely they're going to find their common ancestor, because more than likely they were in Africa somewhere, on the continent of Africa. So on the next slide, you'll see, although they share matches, and they share ethnicity in Cameroon, Congo, Nigeria, etc., it'd be very hard to find that common ancestor. But the point I want to emphasize at this point in the whole process is that while you're doing your research, enjoy the journey, because you're building relationships too. Don't just, again, this is a recommendation. If you're just looking to plug in the numbers and the dots and the squares, that's great. But when you're reaching out and you're finding these connections, try to build some kind of connection, because maybe they have stories they can share, because you'll be going down rabbit holes trying to find your 6th great cousin connected on your paternal side through. It can just be just incredibly tenuous.
let's pause there, Donnie, because we may have to do a part 2 to give people some more help. This definitely gets them started on the first few steps. In just a few minutes as we wrap up, let's jump. Now, we'll talk later about possibly scheduling a part 2 that helps them take a further dive.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a tidbit about what this has been meant in your life in coming to Ecuador, in being able to see these connections? And what I want to jump to is I want to jump to the slide that gives everybody close your eyes so you don't see this swirl before your eyes. But I want you to just briefly tell us how this has impacted you personally in making the connections for you that now
right there,
stretch
right there.
continents. And what we'll
Yeah.
do is we'll take just a few minutes. Thank you for those that give us just maybe 5 minutes more of your time to see if there's any questions about those first few steps of getting started, getting your process organized. So tell us where this has landed you and how you've been able to connect these dots together. And then if they'd like to hear more, we'll see about getting you scheduled to do some more talking with people on going a little bit deeper, because the rest of the presentation is so meaningful, but we want to be respectful of individuals' time and get them started and give them the best chance for success. So tell me where your discoveries have led you and what strings you're currently trying to connect in pulling the identity and this exploration and discoveries into your life.
Great, thanks, Leon. And that's true, because there's so much we want to, if we can, have a follow-on. Well, to culminate everything, from all the resources I shared with you and my own personal journey, it led me basically to this screen. This screen is a summary. By looking at my own traditional genealogy research, combining that with my genetic DNA research, I was able to find living relatives in Nigeria and a historical connection to the Clotilda and Osakibi, who there's a very beautiful documentary about that story. But what it allowed me to do is really come to grips and make it personal that, wow, I'm actually finding and meeting and building relationships and making connections with my roots in Africa and Latin America and North America, because as the whole concept is, we really are more connected than we realize. And that's what really hits home with me, is that I didn't realize that when I was growing up, but in the process of this genealogical journey, and that's what it is, it's not a destination, I realized that we are more closely related than we realize. I'm in Ecuador, and how ironic was that I picked Ecuador to retire in, and then I realized I actually have living relatives in the same area, in the same region that I chose to retire. And so one thing that I want to leave on this point, I'm just going to leave it open to questions, is that because I know it's a personal journey for me, I'm able to, what we call breaking bread. I'm able to sit down and actually listen to the stories personally with these people. They're not just a little square in my tree. These are actually real people that we communicate with often daily. They share stories. I'm able to make a personal, soulful connection to my roots and regions of the world I never believed. I heard my grandmother talk about these stories of my indigenous Native American ancestry. I didn't know it was true, but it's true, according to what I found. The stories my grandmother, my mother, thinking that we came from Ghana and Benin. Well, it's true. And to find these connections all across Ecuador, and how ironic, again, as Rana said, here I am in Ecuador, area of my roots. So I'm continuing DNA testing of relatives throughout the African diaspora. And you'll see in this map, the blue dots and the yellow dots are some of the areas that I plan to go. But that's what I hope to do, is continue this journey. And if it can be a help to others, I'd be happy to assist as well. I look forward to your questions.
I was just gonna add in there how interesting it was, because my father's Cuban, my mother's German, right? And when I did my ancestry and I saw that I was actually more French, because what I had heard was that my great grandmother, or my great great grandmother, was a slave in Cuba, that the French and the Spaniards, when they came down and colonized down there, somebody bought her, right, and went back up to Spain with her, married her, because I think in Cuba that was not allowed, married her, and then they came back and they owned a sugar plantation or something there, in Cuba. And I learned that, so when I did my ancestry, I said I'm Cuban and I'm German, is what I always told people. But when I actually looked it up, it was actually I'm French and German, because I
Oh,
actually had, and I have this very small amount of actual Cuban, but it's mainly French and German from when France was in Cuba. And I was like, oh, and my father told all his friends at the retirement place that he lives, and he said, I apologize to everybody. I've always said I'm Cuban. He said, I'm actually not Cuban. I found out I'm French.
So there were a couple of things in the chat. One,
Yes.
mentioned resource Latter-day Saints. I have personally found that to be very helpful. They have a very extensive genealogy collection. You do not have to be Latter-day Saints. Many of the congregations have space where you can come and use their system and learn how to use that. One of the questions in the chat was about finding resources. Got family in Poland, but there is a loss of information due to fires. Stuck on second and third great grandparents. What would you reference from your experience,
yeah,
Donnie, in
yeah.
that regard?
There's one slide that I think will help address that question. It's further back where it's a research page where it shows regions. It's like a blue slide, and it shows regions. And even before that, you find that slide. Um, that's a resource in Ancestry, and also FamilySearch.org. In Ancestry, they have a list of regions. You mentioned Poland. They have European collections of ancestry records and archives just based on regions. So if you're having difficulty finding information on one source, you can always try Ancestry and FamilySearch.org, because they actually have regional collections. So if you're searching for in the UK or in Asia, they even have a collection, I believe, in the Pacific. I think no, there's another slide. There's a blue slide that has like a picture of a map. But FamilySearch.org has a very extensive collection, and also National Archives. And I put the website in one of the slides. It shows those records at the National Archives are also free. Yeah, there's another slide. There's a blue background. Yeah, that's, I don't know. I don't know if I can share my screen. Yeah, I think it's further back. It's a little further back. But I would say those, yeah, FamilySearch.org, register, it's free. And you can also, again, create a tree there, but your tree on FamilySearch.org is basically public, because whatever you add to someone who has already passed away, that becomes public. And another research I want to leave with you as far as sources is wikitree.com. And you mentioned, again, Poland. I just sort of took that as a, yeah, that's one of the areas of focus. Yes. Yeah, that one right there, where you can explore by a location where they have collections. And I think this isn't the whole view, but of course you can see one they have in Eastern Europe as well, Ukraine, Belarus, France. But there's a slide that shows a WikiTree. I recommend that anyone who's interested in researching outside the boundaries of the US, North America, South America, sign up for a free account on WikiTree, because WikiTree, what's very unique about that, they're building a global tree. So Christine was talking about how big her tree was. If you go to the slide with, yeah, there you go. 31 million people have already connected their trees, and it's by region as well. So in this specific website, wikitree.com, open up a free account. And again, you can make your tree private or public. You can search just by the regions that you're interested in: Poland, France, Italy, Greece, Cuba. And you'll find that these trees that are already being created, they've already been vetted, because this is a site where you can't put a profile in unless you have a fact. So if you find a relative there, you're able to make a connection based on region or even ethnicity or even a surname. You can do searches just on surnames. And a funny thing about this screen, for example, as I said, we're all interconnected. Once you have your profile, you can use your profile. You are assigned an ID, and every profile has an ID number that's connected to their tree. So, for example, this is Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder. Okay, are they related? Probably not by blood, but yes, they're related in 35 degrees. If you look at their two trees, they're related by marriage. And so you can do the same thing for yourself. And let's say a region or someone notable in an area you're looking for. You put that person's profile in, living or someone who's passed away, even a historical figure, and you'd be surprised. And if you go to the next screen, just for giggles and grins, before we leave today, and then this will be a good follow-on. If we do have a follow-up, it'd be great to see if everyone creates an ancestry tree and creates a wiki tree profile to see how close you are to different notable figures. For me, the first thing I wanted to know is, okay, am I related to Sarah Vaughan? Because I just love her. She's a jazz artist. I realized I was 31 degrees. So we're related by marriage within 31 degrees. So she's in my tree. And then I said, how about Jimi Hendrix? He's in my tree. I put him in my tree because I can really trace my connection to Jimi Hendrix by marriage in 20 steps. But
Very
what's really
cool.
funny is the closest person on WikiTree that I'm related to is Johnny Cash. I said, what? I looked and said, wait a minute. So I looked closer. He's 11 steps to my great grandmother. I said, wait a minute, 11 steps, but that counts me. So if I take myself out and my father, that's even closer. And I realized he's 10 steps from someone that I know. I'm like, uh-oh, this is part 2, guys. So hopefully if we do have a follow-on, maybe I can do
Well,
some more work.
I hope everyone is now ready for the rabbit trail. I hope they're ready to dig
Yeah,
deep.
I was thinking here I'm gonna go down the hole again. So
If you like rabbit trails and mysteries, genealogy for me has really been one of those places that you can go on any manner of deep explorations in finding identity and connection. And it's so much information that I will have to see about getting on Donnie's schedule to do a part 2. So he has challenged you. If you have not started, if you have not done your set up a place, and Ancestry is a good place. He's now shared with you how to do that at no cost. So this doesn't stop you from getting started. And begin just the exploration that you can. Set up your tree on Ancestry. He challenged you to go to the wiki place and create that profile there and just get started. And we'll pick back up. We will make some information available to be able to remind you of these things to get started. But I hope it has sparked something in you or fueled some passions that you have already found on your own. Some that have mentioned in the screen that they've already started their family work. Donnie, I want to just thank you for sharing your passion and sharing the richness of the work that you've already done to be able to help us in our individual searches for connection, identity. And one of the slides that we didn't show talked about relationships. That this is really about finding our relationship of how we fit into the world and with each other and the discoveries that we're able to find as a result of that. So we want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for participating. Christine, on behalf of the Atlantic Institute, for providing this forum for us to just explore life together. I want to thank you for that. And what I'll do is, Donnie, if you have a closing statement, thought, or challenge, and then I'll turn it back over to Christine to take us out.
Yeah. Okay. Only thing I want to leave you with is pretty much what Laurent said. I challenge you to take the time, take the first steps. If you haven't already done so, take the first steps. Create a tree on those platforms. And let's see if we come back next time and see how far you've gone. And would love to hear about what you discovered in your journey.
I was just going to say, I love the idea of doing a part 2 and having the challenge. I'll send you the email list, Lorana, of everybody that has RCP, because they can know, even if they didn't make it now and they want to make the second one, like And I almost think not like we need a little bit more than even a month, because sometimes becomes a rabbit hole that becomes a little time consuming. And I'd love to see if any of us are actually related. I'd love
Yeah,
to see how far down
that's
any of us might
that's
actually
the
be related.
surprise. Remember the slide. I said, be
Yeah,
ready,
yeah,
buckle up.
yeah. That would be kind of cool
And
to
that's
see.
been the story of the friendship with Donnie and I, that as I've gotten my DNA, there's someone in my DNA that's in his DNA. So we know there's a link, even though we haven't created the lines that connect those
Yes.
yet. It's that we really are connected. Of all the places in the world I could be, and all the places in the world he could be, because we're both Americans and we both are now connected to Ecuador, but to really found biological relatives of randomness in Ecuador means that there's a connection for me too, in some distant yet to be connected way. So we thank you all for letting us share. This is one of the ways for me of continuing my work of saying we're connected. Let's look for the things that connect us. Let's look for the bridges and the strings that connect these dots. So thank you for letting me take this place and sharing in that with you and for all of you. And Christine, take us out.
All right, you guys, thank you. You all have a great weekend. Feel free to unmute yourself if you like, and you could say goodbye. You could say thank you. You can unname yourself and become a face if you want, and you can show us who you are and say hello and goodbye. Donnie, I appreciate you breaking it down so well for us, because that really helped to break it down, because nobody explains this to you as you start this journey down this rabbit hole. So anyway, I appreciate you all. Thank you very much. And with that, you all have a great rest of the weekend.
Enjoy your weekend, all. Donnie, thank you again. Gratitude. Much gratitude.